The sound of the mail truck pulling away echoes through the quiet Texas suburb. As John Henderson limps toward his mailbox, his left leg still stiff from shrapnel wounds that refuse to fully heal. He's expecting another VA appointment letter, maybe a bill. What he finds instead will turn his world upside down and spark a battle that will divide his entire neighborhood. But what happened next shocked everyone, including John himself. John's weathered hands shake slightly as he tears open the official-looking envelope, bearing the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association seal. His eyes scan the formal letterhead before landing on the words that make his blood run cold. Property violation notice, fine amount, $2,500. What the hell, John mutters, rereading the notice that cites his unkempt lawn, overgrown vegetation, and damaged fencing as violations of the community's aesthetic standards. The letter demands immediate payment and lawn restoration within 15 days, or face additional penalties and potential legal action. Standing there in his driveway, still wearing the same army t-shirt he's had on for 3 days, John can't believe what he's reading. His lawn, sure, it's gotten a little wild. The grass reaches nearly to his knees in some spots, and that section of fence has been leaning since the neighbor's tree fell on it during last month's storm. But $2,500? For a veteran who can barely afford his medication, who spends most days just trying to move without wincing from the constant pain in his back and leg. Little did John know that this moment would become the catalyst for something much bigger than a simple neighborhood dispute. John's mind drifts back 18 months ago, to the dusty hills of Afghanistan, where he served his 3rd tour as a staff sergeant. He remembers the weight of his gear, the constant vigilance, the brotherhood of soldiers who had each other's backs no matter what. Then came that October morning when his convoy hit an IED. The explosion threw him 20 feet, crushing vertebrae and filling his leg with metal fragments that doctors are still working to remove. "You're lucky to be walking," the VA doctor had told him. Lucky. John doesn't feel lucky as he looks at his overgrown yard, knowing he can barely manage to shower some days, let alone push a lawnmower across an acre of Texas grass in the blazing summer heat. The rehabilitation has been brutal, months of physical therapy, learning to walk again, dealing with the nightmares that wake him up screaming at 3 in the morning. Some days, just making it to the mailbox feels like a victory. The thought of yard work, of bending and stretching and lifting, sends shooting pains through his damaged spine just thinking about it. John crumples the letter in his fist, then immediately smooths it out again. He needs to think clearly about this. $2,500 might as well be $25,000. He doesn't have it. His disability payments barely cover his mortgage and medical expenses, and with his injuries preventing him from returning to his job at the construction company, every dollar has to be stretched. But the real shock was still coming. As John turns toward his house, he notices something he hadn't paid attention to before. His neighbor across the street, Mrs. Patterson, is standing at her perfectly manicured lawn's edge, arms crossed, staring directly at him with an expression that could freeze hell over. When their eyes meet, she doesn't wave or nod like she used to when he first moved in. Instead, she turns abruptly and marches back into her house, slamming the door behind her. A chill runs down John's spine that has nothing to do with the Texas heat. How many of his neighbors have been watching his struggles, judging his inability to maintain his property to their standards? How many have complained to the HOA about the wounded veteran who dared to let his grass grow too tall? John looks down at the notice again, focusing on a detail he missed the first time. The complaint was filed not by some anonymous inspector, but by concerned community members who reported his property as an eyesore that negatively impacts neighborhood values. His own neighbors, people he used to wave to, whose packages he'd accepted when they weren't home, who had welcomed him to the community with casseroles and handshakes when he first bought the house 2 years ago. Now they were reporting him like he was some kind of criminal. The betrayal cuts deeper than any physical wound he's endured. John spent years defending his country, sacrificing his body and his peace of mind to protect the freedoms and values of communities, just like this one. And this is how they repay him, with fines and judgment and whispered complaints to the authorities. This decision would change everything, hanging in the balance of what John chooses to do next. Standing in his driveway, holding that crumpled notice, John Henderson makes a choice that will transform not just his own life, but the entire fabric of his community. He's not going to pay this fine. He's not going to let them push him around. He survived 3 tours in Afghanistan and an explosion that should have killed him. He's not about to be defeated by a homeowners association and a bunch of neighbors who've forgotten what sacrifice really means. But John has no idea that his decision to fight back will uncover secrets about his community that run much deeper than overgrown grass, and that help will come from the most unexpected places. The fine amount stared back at John from the crisp white paper, $500. His hands trembled slightly as he read it again, disbelief washing over him like a cold wave. $500 for a lawn he couldn't physically maintain, in a house he was barely managing to afford on disability benefits. This can't be right, he muttered, grabbing his crutches and making his way to the front door. The afternoon Texas sun beat down mercilessly as he surveyed his property with fresh eyes. The grass had grown wild during his recent hospital stay, and the fence post had snapped during last month's storm while he was laid up in bed, unable to move without excruciating pain shooting through his back. Within an hour, John found himself standing outside the pristine colonial home of Linda Moore, HOA president. Her manicured lawn looked like something out of a magazine, every blade of grass perfectly trimmed, every flower bed geometrically precise. He rang the doorbell, his jaw set with determination. Linda answered the door wearing a crisp white blouse and that practiced smile he'd seen at the few neighborhood meetings he'd managed to attend. "John, what a surprise. How can I help you?" "You can start by explaining this," John said, holding up the fine notice. $500 because my grass is too long? Linda's smile faltered slightly. "Well, according to the covenant guidelines, section 4.7, all lawns must be maintained at a height not exceeding 3 inches. Your property has been in violation for over 6 weeks. I've been recovering from surgery," John said, his voice rising. "I can barely walk, let alone push a lawn mower." "I understand that, John, I really do," Linda replied, though her tone remained businesslike. "But the rules apply to everyone equally. We can't make exceptions, or where would it end?" As their voices grew louder, a woman emerged from the house next door. Lisa Jennings was in her 40s, with graying brown hair pulled back in a ponytail and dirt under her fingernails. From working in her garden, she'd been the one neighbor who'd actually welcomed John when he moved in 6 months ago. "Everything okay over here?" Lisa asked, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Linda straightened her shoulders. "Just discussing HOA business, Lisa. Nothing that concerns you." But Lisa's eyes had already found the fine notice in John's hand. Her expression hardened. "Let me guess. Another ridiculous fine for something completely unreasonable." "The Homeowners Association exists to maintain property values," Linda said stiffly. "I'm sure you understand the importance of that." Lisa laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Oh, I understand perfectly. I've been fighting your bogus fines for 3 years. Remember when you tried to charge me $100 because my mailbox was painted forest green instead of hunter green?" John looked between the two women, sensing a history he didn't fully understand. "You fought them and won?" "Damn right I did," Lisa said, then glanced apologetically at John. "Sorry, didn't mean to curse. But yes, I've beaten them twice in arbitration." Linda here doesn't like to mention that part. Linda's face flushed red. Those were isolated incidents involving interpretation of color specifications. "And what about Mrs. Patterson's fine for having her garage door open during the day?" Lisa continued. "Or the Hendersons on Maple Street getting cited because their grandson's bicycle was visible in their driveway?" The more Lisa spoke, the more John realized he wasn't alone in this fight. But he also saw the steel in Linda's eyes, the way her jaw clenched with each example Lisa provided. That evening, the community center buzzed with tension as neighbors filed in for the monthly HOA meeting. John sat in the back row, Lisa beside him, while Linda took her place at the front table with the other board members. When the time came for community concerns, John stood up slowly, leaning heavily on his crutch. "I received a $500 fine yesterday," he began, his voice carrying across the room. "For not maintaining my lawn to HOA standards." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some residents nodded sympathetically, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Margaret Wells, an elderly woman from Oak Street, raised her hand. "Well, I have to say, some properties in this neighborhood have become quite unsightly. We moved here for the standards." "Easy for you to say," called out Bob Matthews from the middle of the room. John barely knew Bob, a quiet man who lived 3 streets over, but his voice carried unexpected passion. "Your husband can still climb on a ladder and trim your hedges. Some of us are dealing with different circumstances." The room erupted in cross conversations, voices rising as neighbors turned to face each other. Linda banged her gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order. "The rules exist for everyone's benefit," she announced firmly. "We cannot and will not make exceptions based on personal circumstances. That would set a dangerous precedent." But in the meeting, a surprising ally stood up. Maria Santos, a young mother John had only seen in passing, rose from her seat near the front. "I volunteer to mow Mr. Henderson's lawn," she said clearly. "My teenage son needs community service hours for school anyway. And I'll fix that fence post," added Bob Matthews. "I've got the materials sitting in my garage from my own project." More voices joined in, offering help, sharing their own stories of struggling with HOA demands. John felt something he hadn't experienced since returning home, hope. But Linda's expression had turned thunderous. She whispered urgently to the board member beside her, then stood up with a manila folder in her hand. "This meeting is adjourned," she announced abruptly. "Any further discussion of specific fines will be handled through proper legal channels." As the crowd began to disperse, Lisa leaned close to John's ear. "She's rattled. That folder she grabbed, I've seen it before. She's about to escalate this thing way beyond a simple fine." As John made his way home that night, aided by Bob and Maria's kind offers to walk with him, he found a small white envelope tucked under his front door, with no return address and his name written in block letters. The mysterious note inside contained just one line that sent chills down his spine. "Linda Moore has done this before, and there's proof." The mysterious note in John's mailbox feels like a lifeline in his trembling hands. "There's a way to fight this," it reads in careful handwriting. "Meet me at Miller's coffee shop tomorrow at 2 p.m. A friend who knows the HOA's secrets." John stares at the note for what feels like hours, his mind racing between hope and suspicion. His VA disability checks barely cover his mortgage and medical bills, and the $5,000 fine might as well be $50,000. He can't work construction anymore, not with the shrapnel still lodged near his spine and the nightmares that wake him screaming at 3 in the morning. The next afternoon, John limps into Miller's coffee shop, scanning the nearly empty space nervously. A woman in her 50s waves him over from a corner booth, her gray hair pulled back and her eyes sharp with determination. "You must be John. I'm Patricia Williams, and I've been fighting this HOA for 3 years, she says, sliding a thick manila folder across the table. "That note wasn't from Lisa Jennings, by the way. It was from me." John's confusion must show on his face, because Patricia continues quickly. "Lisa's heart is in the right place, but she doesn't know what I know. This HOA has been systematically targeting vulnerable homeowners for years, and I've been documenting every single case." She opens the folder, revealing photographs, copies of fines, and what looks like financial records. "See this. Mrs. Chen, elderly widow. Fined $8,000 for unauthorized garden decorations that were just her late husband's. Memorial stones. Mr. Rodriguez, deployed overseas. Came home to liens on his house for grass that grew too tall while he was serving our country." John's hands clench into fists as he flips through page after page of similar stories. "How is this legal?" "It's barely legal, and that's the problem," Patricia says, leaning forward intensely. "But here's what Linda Moore and her board don't want anyone to know. They've been pocketing a percentage of these fines through their management company. It's not about community standards, John. It's about profit." The revelation hits John like a physical blow. All those nights he'd lain awake wondering what he'd done wrong, how he'd failed his neighborhood. And it was never about his lawn at all. But Patricia isn't finished. "I used to be an investigative journalist before I retired here. I've been building a case, but I needed someone with your story, your credibility as a veteran. To make this stick, she pulls out another document. This is a complaint I've drafted for the State Attorney General's office. Your signature could trigger a full investigation. John stares at the papers, his heart pounding. Part of him just wants to retreat to his house, to heal quietly without causing waves. The other part, the soldier who'd never backed down from a fight, feels something stirring that's been dormant since he came home. What would this mean for me? John asks quietly. It means war, Patricia says bluntly. Linda will come after you with everything she has. More fines, legal threats, making your life hell until you either pay up or move out. But John, if we don't stop this, how many more veterans, how many more vulnerable people are going to lose their homes? John thinks about the young soldier in his unit, Martinez, who'd talked constantly about the house he was buying for his pregnant wife. Martinez didn't make it home, but somewhere out there, his widow might be facing exactly what John is facing now. I need to think about this, John says, but even as he speaks, he knows his decision is already made. Some battles choose you, whether you're ready or not. Patricia nods understandingly. Take the folder, read everything. But John, whatever you decide, decide quickly. I heard through my sources that Linda's planning to escalate your case next week. She wants to make an example of you. John walks home clutching the folder, his mind churning with possibilities and fears. As he turns onto his street, he sees Linda Moore's car parked in front of his house, and his blood turns to ice. Standing on his front porch, Linda isn't alone. She's with a man in a suit carrying an official-looking briefcase, and they're both staring directly at John with expressions that promise his quiet suffering is about to become very public. The doorbell rings at exactly 8 in the morning, and John opens it to find a young woman holding a microphone with Channel 7 news blazoned across it. Behind her stands a cameraman, already rolling. Mr. Henderson, I'm Sarah Martinez from Channel 7. We received word about your situation with the HOA fine. Would you be willing to share your story? John's heart pounds. He hadn't expected this. How did you hear about it? A concerned neighbor reached out to us. Stories like yours resonate with people, especially when they involve our veterans. Within hours, John's story spreads across social media. The local news segment shows his overgrown lawn, his Purple Heart displayed on the mantel, and his struggle to maintain his property while recovering from his injuries. The comments pour in by the hundreds, most expressing outrage at the HOA's treatment of a wounded veteran. But Linda Moore isn't backing down. She calls an emergency HOA board meeting that very evening, her voice sharp with determination as she addresses the other board members. This media circus doesn't change the facts, Linda declares, her fingers drumming against the conference table. Rules are rules. If we make exceptions, even for veterans, where does it end? The integrity of our community depends on consistent enforcement. Board member Patricia Williams shifts uncomfortably. Linda, the optics here are really bad. People are calling us heartless. I don't care about optics, Linda snaps. I care about property values. John Henderson's lawn is bringing down the entire neighborhood's worth. If he can't maintain his property, maybe he shouldn't live here. The room falls silent. Even Linda's strongest supporters seem taken aback by her harsh words. Meanwhile, across the neighborhood, something unexpected is happening. Bob Matthews, the quiet accountant who lives 3 houses down from John, has been watching the news coverage with growing unease. He's never spoken out against the HOA before, never caused waves. But tonight, he knocks on John's door. John, I wanted you to know, Bob says quietly, glancing around nervously. I'm not the only one who thinks this whole thing is wrong. There are more of us than you might think. What do you mean? I've been talking to people. Quietly. The Johnsons got fined last year for having their trash cans visible from the street for 15 minutes too long. The Rodriguezes were cited because their rosebush grew 6 inches over the property line. People are tired of Linda's iron fist, but they've been too scared to speak up. The next morning brings another development that changes everything. A local newspaper runs an investigative piece titled HOA or Highway Robbery. The article reveals a pattern of excessive fines over the past 3 years, with the Pine Valley HOA collecting over $100,000 in penalties. Most shocking of all, The reporter discovered that Linda's own landscaping company has been the preferred vendor for residents who need emergency lawn services to avoid fines. But the story doesn't reveal Linda's personal motivation until later that day, when Lisa discovers something that makes her blood run cold. She's researching HOA records when she finds Linda's original application to live in Pine Valley. The application was rejected twice, once for credit issues, once for a bankruptcy. Linda only got in on her third try after the previous HOA president vouched for her. She's trying to prove she belongs here, Lisa tells John over the phone. She's overcompensating by being the strictest president they've ever had. This isn't about rules, it's about her own insecurity. That afternoon, Linda makes her boldest move yet. She hand-delivers a letter to John's mailbox, this time with a legal threat. The fine has increased to $1,500, with an additional $500 in administrative fees. Worse yet, she's threatening to place a lien on his property if he doesn't pay within 10 days. John stares at the letter, his hands trembling slightly. The financial pressure is becoming unbearable. His disability payments barely cover his medical expenses and basic living costs. $1,500 might as well be $15,000. But as he stands there, feeling the weight of despair settling over him again, his phone starts buzzing with text messages. One after another, neighbors are reaching out. People he's never even spoken to are offering support. Mrs. Chen from the corner house offers to help with yard work. The teenager from across the street volunteers to mow his lawn for free. Even some board members are privately expressing their disgust with Linda's tactics. The momentum is building, but John doesn't realize just how much until that evening, when Lisa calls with urgency in her voice. "John, you need to turn on Channel 7 right now. They're running a follow-up story, and you're not going to believe who they interviewed." As John flips to the news, he sees a familiar face on screen, but it's not someone he expected. The revelation about to unfold will change everything about how this battle plays out. And it's coming from someone who knows Linda's secrets better than anyone else in Pine Valley. The camera zooms in on the person's face, and John's jaw drops as he realizes this testimony could destroy Linda's credibility completely. The knock on John's door comes at 7 in the morning, startling him from his first decent night's sleep in weeks. Through the peephole, he sees a woman in a crisp navy suit holding a briefcase, her expression both professional and compassionate. When he opens the door, she extends her hand with a warm smile. "Mr. Henderson, I'm Sarah Chen from the Texas Veterans Legal Defense Coalition. I've been following your story in the news, and we'd like to help." John stares at her in disbelief, still processing that someone he's never met has driven here specifically to help him fight the HOA. Sarah explains that her organization specializes in cases where veterans face discrimination or unfair treatment, and they've seen John's situation play out in communities across Texas. "You're not alone in this fight," she tells him, pulling out a thick folder. "We've documented similar cases, and we know exactly how to handle HOA letters that overstep their bounds." As Sarah reviews the legal options available to him, John's phone starts buzzing incessantly. Through his window, he sees something that makes his heart skip a beat. Lisa is walking up his driveway, but she's not alone. Behind her comes Bob Matthews, the quiet neighbor from 3 houses down, carrying a lawnmower. Then Mrs. Rodriguez from across the street appears with gardening gloves and a rake. Within minutes, John watches in stunned silence as nearly 24 neighbors converge on his property, armed with lawn equipment, mulch bags, and determined expressions. Lisa bounds up to his front porch, her eyes bright with excitement. "We saw the lawyer's car and figured this was the perfect time for Operation Community Care," she announces. "Nobody messes with our veterans, especially not some power-hungry HOA board." Bob, normally a man of few words, steps forward and places a firm hand on John's shoulder. "Son, I served in Vietnam, and when I came home, my neighbors looked out for me too. It's time we returned the favor." His voice cracks slightly as he continues. "We should have been here sooner. That's on us, but we're here now." What follows is the most extraordinary display of community spirit John has ever witnessed. While Sarah works inside reviewing HOA bylaws and preparing legal documents, the entire neighborhood transforms his yard. into something resembling a professional landscaping showcase. The women organize themselves into teams, some weeding flower beds while others plant new shrubs. The men tackle the broken fence, and someone even brings concrete to repair the cracked walkway. Children from the neighborhood set up a lemonade stand, insisting that all proceeds go toward John's legal fund, though Sarah has already assured him their services are completely free. Teenagers with smartphones document everything, posting updates to social media with hashtags like Veteransdeserverter and Communitiver HOA. Around noon, a white Mercedes pulls up to the curb, and Linda Moore steps out, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. She marches toward the gathering crowd, clearly preparing for confrontation, but stops short when she sees the local news van that has just arrived. The reporter, Michelle Santos, had covered John's story earlier in the week, and now she's here to document this incredible community response. Linda approaches John with obvious reluctance, her usual authoritative demeanor replaced by visible discomfort. "Mr. Henderson," she begins, her voice tight, "the HOA board has reviewed your case, and in light of recent circumstances, we've decided to rescind the fine." The crowd erupts in cheers, but John raises his hand for quiet. His voice is steady but emotional as he responds, "Mrs. Moore, I appreciate that, but this was never really about the money. This was about understanding that we're all part of the same community, and sometimes people need help instead of punishment." Sarah steps beside John, her legal documents no longer needed, but her presence still significant. "The beauty of what happened here today," she tells the news camera, "is that it shows how communities can solve problems when they choose compassion over bureaucracy." As the sun begins to set, John's yard looks completely transformed. The grass is evenly cut, the fence is repaired and freshly painted, flower beds burst with colorful blooms, and the walkway looks brand new. But more importantly, John feels transformed too. The isolation that had surrounded him like a wall for months has crumbled, replaced by genuine connections with people who now feel like extended family. Standing before the gathered crowd as they pack up their tools, John struggles to find adequate words. "When I was overseas," he begins, his voice carrying across the quiet evening, "we always talked about what we were fighting for. We said we were fighting for home, for community, for the idea that Americans look out for each other. Today, you showed me that wasn't just talk. You showed me that home really does exist." Lisa, now covered in dirt, but beaming with satisfaction, gives him a fierce hug. "Welcome home, John. Really welcome home this time." The story spreads far beyond their Texas suburb, inspiring similar acts of community support for veterans across the country. John's lawn becomes a symbol of what's possible when neighbors choose connection over conflict, and his journey from isolation to belonging reminds everyone that sometimes the most powerful victories happen not in courtrooms, but in the simple act of showing up for each other.